Good morning. Welcome. Look, the sun is coming out. We don't have so much fog now, so yay. Welcome to the Modesto City Schools special board meeting of February 1st. This meeting is now called to order. I'd like to refer anyone who needs translator services to my left to Ms. Maria Labato, and she will do translator services in Spanish. This meeting is being videotaped and recorded. You can view the video of this meeting or past meetings on our website. So, our first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And I have a request to move 3 items to discussion. They are, I was going to say kind of the titles of them. Whoops, I don't have it now. Yes, they're, I know I didn't have one, but that's okay. Let me grab one. They are AR 3516.3 Earthquake Emergency Procedure System, AR 3541.5 Use of District Vehicles, AR and the E 7310 Melrose Funding. So, are we good with, yes, Mr. Brown?
I don't want to remove anything, but I do want to make a comment before we vote.
Okay.
So you tell me when that's appropriate.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so first we will see, do I have a motion to move these off of the consent for discussion? So moved. Okay, moved by trustee Walker, seconded by trustee Irvin. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And now we will do the order of discussion action items, and I'll allow Mr. Brown.
Yes, as I've reviewed the whole binder, I saw that there were lots of references, especially in the ARs, to very specific things that the board needs to review in report form at least annually. I want to make sure, rather than bring each one of them up as it comes,
Right,
that the district looks at these, especially the items regarding safety, that we identify when the board's going to receive reports on those. And it doesn't appear that it needs to be necessarily in a board meeting, but we should have them calendared so that we are up to date at all times.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And now, because we only voted on moving those off of consent to discussion items, I would like to have us have the approval of the consent agenda be excluding those 3 items. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by trustee West, seconded by trustee Brown. All those we're voting on the consent agenda. So we just voted to move those items off of consent for discussion first, and that was moved by Walker and Irvin. And then now we're approving the consent agenda. So yes, that's fine. So I realized, wait, I didn't have us vote on the consent agenda. So trustee Walker and seconded by trustee Brown to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
All right, now to place these into discussion action items. So I had a suggestion to move the AR 3516.3 right after the board policy. So it would be 3A, B3A. So you can put a little mark there, that's where we'll go. And then AR 3541.5, that would go after B7A. And then the last one, AR E7310, will go right after B21. And that'll be A. So if that meets everyone's expectations, then I need a motion to approve the discussion action items along with all the rest of it. Do I have a motion to approve that? Trustee West approves the discussion action items. Do I have a second?
Second.
Trustee Walker, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Passes unanimously except for one absent board member, Newman, which I should have said at the beginning, but I did not.
Here she comes.
Okay. All right, we'll wait just a moment. Good morning. Yes, that's right. Okay, moving on to our discussion action items. Item B1, approval of the first reading of proposed draft of Board Policy 3511, Energy and Water Management. And I don't know who Mr. Zerly. I did not see it. Yes, it looks like you're like on here a lot. It is the Zerly Show. All right.
Thank you,
Mr.
President
Zerly.
Marsh.
Trustee.
Good morning, trustees, and I'm not sure if I should feel honored or not, or about having my name on every agenda item, but after sitting through the first two special board meetings, here we are with the 3000 series. And so the first one, as noted on the agenda, is Board Policy 3511, Energy and Water Management. This is a new policy for us. It did not exist. The language that we have is from the CSBA recommended language. It has been reviewed by staff for accuracy. And also one thing that's important about this, in our most recently approved agreement with Synergistic, and as we move forward with that on April 1st as our board approved start date in the contract, it is required in the contract that we have this board policy in existence. So not only it should be had, but it's required as we move forward with that contract.
Any questions from the board? Trustee Newman?
The only question I had was with regard to Grigori and the fact that we have a different kind of water system there. Does that raise any issues for this policy? Does this policy allow for that? I mean, it's kind of an unusual circumstance. So I just want to make sure our policy fits with the reality of our comprehensive schools.
Yeah, I believe we can still have a water management policy even on a school site that has its own supply.
Okay.
So I don't see it as being contradictory myself, and neither did staff when they reviewed it, but
Okay, so that was considered when we...
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Good deal.
Trustee Brown?
Yes, I'm just curious, will Synergistics be involved in helping us put together this plan?
yes, we will have come back to the board with a set of guidelines for that plan prior to April 1st.
Okay, so the
That follows
timing,
this board policy.
so the timing of the plan is scheduled to hit about April 1st then?
That was our start date when we asked the board to approve the agreement, yes.
Okay.
Okay, because there isn't anyone from the public, I'm just going to forego that and just say there's no one in the public. Unless someone arrives, then we'll make sure we go to the public. Unless Ms. Lovato would like to say anything and have a comment. Nope. All right. So then back to the board for any other comments.
I move for approval.
It's been moved by Trustee Newman, seconded by Trustee, Trustee West. Okay, by Trustee West. All those in favor of approving Board Policy 3111, please say aye. Aye. See, it passes unanimously. Moving on to item B2, approval of first reading of proposed revision of Board Policy 3513.3, tobacco-free schools. Associate Superintendent Zerly.
Thank you. Board Policy 3513.3, we did have prior, so you do notice the lineouts of the black font language in the board policy being replaced by, again, the CSBA recommended language that is in red. That would be new language that is added to this policy for tobacco-free schools. There is other board policies about tobacco for in the student services section, but this would be specifically for our facilities.
Any questions from board members? Trustee Newman?
Okay. This is the one policy today that I'm like, oh, have a lot to say about. Because one of the things I want to point out to the board is that our student representative, who it's too bad he's not here this morning, this has been a big issue for our students. Inter-High Council has come up with a plan, or at least is trying to come up with a plan, a proposal for us to put vaping detection devices in our bathrooms. This is a huge issue. My son came home from a basketball game the other night. The kid in front of him was vaping the whole time. He's coughing and hacking, and he's mad. And he says, you should have a policy, Mom. So I said, I think we do. You probably should have gone and told someone. He goes, yeah, right. So this is a huge issue. This policy is interesting because we do address it at in a number 2. A number 2 on the second page. It addresses it. However, it limits it to tobacco products include. Okay, so I am not totally familiar with vaping and all the nuances to it, but I'm not sure that all vaping devices have tobacco. Am I right? He's nodding. Okay.
Right.
So then that means that a student can vape or anybody else can vape because it's not tobacco in the vaping device. So unless we have vaping not allowed, then we have a problem. So that's kind of where the policy needs to address what we already know. The other issue we need to be cognizant of at this point is many school districts across the state and in the country and our own neighboring school district of Ceres is suing Juul for the impact on education and students. And so this is something that is very real. I know students who, they're vaping in class. Yeah, that's apparently what's happening. So it's very subtle. I don't know whether it's tobacco. I don't know what they're doing with it. Again, I guess I'm too old. But we do need a policy that addresses this issue of vaping and is not limited just to tobacco products. So I would argue that the governing board recognizes that smoking, vaping, or whatever other word we want to use to describe what vaping is, that's a broad word, maybe would work there. So this policy is broader. That's what I would like.
Okay, Superintendent?
Just let me add two comments to what you just shared. One, in number 2, it says or other vaporized liquids, so that puts the umbrella over anything, any substance that's going into.
But it's modified by the top of the paragraph, which says tobacco. So I would argue if I'm a student, if I'm arguing against this policy and a student's being disciplined, that it's limited only to tobacco.
I would suggest that this policy is specific to tobacco, but we do have other language related to marijuana products or other prohibited substances that would be covered under that.
I don't know if they're just, I don't know what's in the.
Well, this BP is tobacco free.
Yeah.
And so we have student conduct policy around anything
think-
that would be in outside of the tobacco. I mean, tobacco is covered under the board under board policy, obviously here as well as in student conduct. But we do have the language to support disciplinary consequences for students that are vaping other than tobacco at school or what have you.
Yeah, we prohibit vaping devices, just like you said. And I see what you're saying. That it kind of contradicts it. I don't read it that way, but I understand what you're saying. We don't allow vaping devices on our school sites, regardless of whether or not there's a liquid in there that's not tobacco based. I mean, that would be impossible to monitor. We would not know what we'd be pulling everybody's device out and saying, "What do you have? What do you have?" So vaping devices are not allowed on our campus.
Right. So should it be something like tobacco-free and electronic
It says electronics in there.
vaping devices free schools? Change the title of it, and it's encompassing all.
I mean, it's smoke. I mean, it's basically anything that disrupts the students' ability to breathe freely.
Yeah.
And so it's broader than that. I mean, certainly we don't want our students, I mean, the tobacco is state law. I mean, this is, because they're not of 18 years of age. So this is 21 years of age now. Now 21, yeah. I mean, that definitely they shouldn't have any device or any product that contains tobacco or nicotine. I'm not sure. I just want to see it broader so that we can, that there's plenty of leverage for us to discipline a student, that there's an expectation that you vape at school, you vape at a game, you vape at a school event, you vape at a dance, you vape at anything having to do with our school and on our premises, you're going to be disciplined.
Yes.
So And I agree with everything you're saying, but the paragraph above that, above number one, where it talks about the use of an electronic smoking device that creates aerosol or vapor or of any oral smoking device for the purpose of circumventing the prohibition of smoking, is that what you're looking for, or do we need to beef this up a little bit for what you're asking?
Could we add, so on the title of the, right above number one, it says tobacco products include, could we put tobacco and electronic device products include? Would that satisfy?
When in
Or substance? Okay,
What we're looking for, if I'm hearing Trustee Newman, by framing it under tobacco, it's narrow in scope. However, Mr. Doe has said there's another policy for that. To make this one broader, we could we put tobacco / substance free schools, and anywhere we see tobacco, we also say substance, because there's multiple things that could be in the vaping devices. There could be marijuana, there could be tobacco, there could be some sugar products and other things that they're putting in there. In some cases, they don't know what they're putting in there. And so if we just put tobacco / substance, then really why we use this is to be able to guide discipline or consequences that would allow us to be able to have any sort of, consequences for anyone with a vaping device. Would that work?
I think the word substance needs to be defined, because substance is anything, but yeah.
It isn't anything in a vaping
Right.
device.
So I'm just looking at substance, at the word substance, tobacco at substance-free schools. So I'm looking at substance could be food substances, it could be anything. So I agree with you on the idea to broaden it. I just thought it should be something that is we'll call it I don't know if it's an illegal substance, but it just seems like it needs to be a little bit more refined.
Marijuana isn't illegal.
That's true. But for their age group, it is illegal. Okay,
For-
so I
for
have a
addition-
lot of lights, but let's go down the list. And I have, let's see, I have Mr. Trustee Brown was first. And then Walker and Lopez. Yep.
So I agree that we need to make this as inclusive as possible. I don't have a problem with it overlapping other policies, especially in this case. But I do want to point out that smoking, we need to define more broadly than just tobacco as well.
True.
can I just add for
First paragraph at the bottom.
For additional reference, under that definition, tobacco products include the reference to Business and Professional Code 22950.5 references. That's part of Division 8.5 of the Stop Tobacco Access to Kids Enforcement Act. And within that, it defines tobacco product means any of the following, some of the tobacco references, but also an electronic device that delivers nicotine or other vaporized liquids to the person inhaling the device, including but not limited to some of the things, electronic cigarette and so on. So there may be an embedded reference that might satisfy the concern.
How about prohibited products include? Instead of tobacco, just do prohibited. But you can think about that. All right, next is Trustee Urban.
I'm in agreement with Trustee Newman and Brown in that, if it overlaps, it overlaps. So do we. I have, my daughter has friends. They vape, and I was talking to another happened to be student, and they were vaping CBD oil. I was like, what the heck? Because of it doesn't have as much THC, but nonetheless, depending on where you get it, who you get it from, it does have some form of THC in it. And I was like, vaping CBD oil, because it's legal. You can buy it at a cart in the mall there, So I think we have to be, as broad as possible, but also specific as well, especially dealing with parents and students who will interpret this differently than we are laying it out here, laying it out. So we need to be careful of how we interpret it, because when I was reading it, I was like, oh, okay. I see some gray areas in there. We need to try to shore up much of the gray areas as possible, just in my opinion.
Okay, trustee Walker?
Trustee Irvin picked up on the piece I was going to say, is that that's the other part of this that I think is an educational issue, is that when they had the initial reports where people were dying because of vaping, part of that was aftermarket cartridges that were brought across the border with people vaping CBD oil. And that was the underlying cause, and I think that's an educational issue. I think I agree with everything everybody said, but I think maybe the piece to do is to take the second policy that Mr. Godot's talking about, and this policy, and flag them and see what student rep comes back with when he does his report, and see where we fold all that into the combination. Because if Inter-High Council is working on this, when he comes back, we go back and look at what they came up with and look at this policy and the other policy and see what got missed. In the sense that I think the underlying ed code covers what we're talking about, but at that point, we'll have feedback from our students and see what they say, and then go back and maybe add the piece about putting in the detectors in the bathrooms because they're a nightmare. I mean, I know I hear plenty of stories from my youngest about smoking in the bathrooms. I think at the end of last year, we had the fire at Enox, and she was walking by, and they're still smoking in the blasted bathrooms, and it's not vaping. But it's sort of a two-pronged bit where there's an educational piece to the kids that says, be careful what you're doing, even if you're not doing it at school, because this is how people have ended up in the hospital damn near dead, because of aftermarket cartridges that go in these machines, and they've been traced back to coming across the borders, because it's an aftermarket third-party bit, and it's a hustle. And sort of fold those two pieces in together, because that's the real danger, is that you end up with one of these things and some kids got something because they don't know any better, and they saw something on a YouTube video and said, oh yay, and now you're in the hospital with lungs that are falling apart, because that was the underlying cause. At least it was my understanding from the CDC, was when we had all those outbreak earlier this year, that underlying cause got traced back to the cartridges and CBD oil, which is not what it's meant to be. And sort of put all that together in a package after we hear back from our student rep, and then we get the student perspective folded in versus just ours, because they're going to know way more about this than we do, if that makes sense.
Thank you, John. Trustee Newman?
Okay, I have some suggestions of what I'd like added. Okay, so in the first page, I would like a sentence at the end that just kind of describes an expectation. So the sentence at the end of the first paragraph: the governing board recognizes that smoking and other uses of tobacco and nicotine products constitute a serious public health hazard and are blah, blah, blah. Okay, at the end of that where it says staff, I think our students and staff, the board believes our staff should have a reasonable expectation of a smoke-free environment. I mean, because we're talking about smoke, so whatever smoke, yeah, vape. Well, is vape smoke?
No, because it doesn't detect the smoke, right? That's why we want.
Oh man, so like, because it's about what, you know, you should be able to go to the bathroom, our students, and not be inundated with this. That's kind of what this is. It's about, this is not something we want readily going on in our schools, and kids are, and students are doing this, and it's difficult to stop. I want our policy to be as broad as possible, and just talk about what our expectation for the air would be. So I don't know, for smoke or a vape-free environment.
Right.
So that sentence would be added there, and then I think that our superintendent was on to something at the beginning of the tobacco tobacco or other substance, there, in that part in the middle, down, where it says tobacco there. I think we should say tobacco or smoking, or tobacco, smoking or vaping products, including any substance.
Yes.
That way, like, we cover smoking, because what if they come up with another kind of way to smoke? And because vaping, because Jules going to be like, hey, man, they're all suing us, so let's get another patent out there and do something else, because this was really lucrative. So, so tobacco, smoking, or vaping products, including any substance, include, and then all the rest is fine. So we just make it a little broader. I think maybe that works, but I'd like some statement, and I'm not sure how we write, like what that should be, but a statement about what is a reasonable expectation for our students and our staff about that. I think it's, this is, it kind of broadly says this is what we expect, and it's a statement that maybe students would understand.
We can work-
Superintendent?
A suggestion would be is connecting back with Trustee Walker and also with Trustee Newman. What we can do is look at some of these recommendations, work with student inter-high council, bring it back for a discussion and not into a consent. So let's work on this a bit along with the other policies around marijuana use and bring it back at a time where we can have more time for discussion on it.
I agree with that. And Trustee Irvin?
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, with all of that going back and forth, we talking about smoking and vaping, and then Trustee Newman said, they come up with another patent. Next thing you know, they'll be snorting it. So where does it end in terms of them? They are targeting young people, and so they're gonna figure out a way to get around it. So I'm sure we'll be revisiting this at some point after this.
True. Oh, okay. Okay, we're going to take the superintendent's suggestion, and we're going to move item B, this was B2, to discussion at a later date. So we're going to table it and move it to a later time to discuss on discussion action item. After there's time to rework some of this, and then also have the student input.
And then combine it with the other policy, whatever that policy that Mr. Godot was talking about, and look at it as a package, so it's more comprehensive, which I think is what you're after. And that seems reasonable, because then you cover every base in one swoop versus redoing it, and get
agree.
Arnov's input,
Yes.
because he's sort of been on top of this since day one.
Okay.
And it is a problem in the bathrooms. I get the stories all the time.
So
I don't know why that is. We were smarter when I was a kid. We went down to the baseball field.
So we need a motion to move this to another discussion, to move it off this agenda to a discussion. Do you have a motion?
It's not a motion to move it off the agenda. We discussed it now,
Okay.
but we're moving to table it
Yes.
for a first and second read again in a discussion item in a regular board meeting. So I'll go ahead and make that
Okay,
motion.
so a motion by Trustee Newman, seconded by Trustee Lopez. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Moving on to item B3, approval of first reading of proposed revision of Board Policy 3516, Emergencies and Disaster Preparedness Plan.
This is another existing board policy that we had, and there's some changes based on, again, CSBA recommended language. I just want to point out before we get into it, there was some merge issues with this one I want to correct, and that is on the first page of BP 3516 where it says CF 3516.3.
Yes.
That should be an NA. So it's listed there, but that will be coming back at a future board meeting. And then right below that where it says the superintendent/designee in black is lined out, that paragraph should start with, in developing the disaster preparedness master plan. So I didn't read, obviously
Yeah,
did not
that's
read
good.
correctly as well. And then the second page, this was a CSBA error, and we just picked it up. The CF 3513.3, which is the board policy we just talked about, is not District Police Security Department. That is tobacco-free schools. So we'll make that change in the name of that CF. So with that, we will answer any questions.
Okay, so Trustee West.
I read through this, and my only suggestion would be to put something in here about reviewing and updating the plan, because I know I've worked in many schools where our preparedness plan binder was stuck on a shelf somewhere for 10 years collecting dust, and it was never reviewed. And I didn't see in here where this plan would be updated on a basis, maybe every other year or something, so that we could make sure that our plan is current and reviewed.
Okay, Trustee Brown.
So in that same vein, on the second page, the middle paragraph in red, talks about providing training to employees regarding their responsibilities, including periodic drills and exercises. I'm just curious if we need to have something that states what our frequency will be for that training. Is that an annual training? Because we could satisfy the policy if we do it once, and that doesn't feel like it's enough.
Okay, I mean, we have required frequency trainings or drills for our school sites, and that is in another board policy.
I saw that.
But we don't have anything for like our
For training
our
employees
support
of their
services
responsibilities, that
divisions.
just feels to me like maybe we're not as strong there as we are with the drills.
We're not, and we're working on that. But we are establishing drills for our support offices, which in the district office complex, we are in the process of implementing that. But if you would like some sort of frequency on that, we can definitely
So should
add
that-
that in.
I'm
but
just asking,
there's no
should that be an
requirement
annual
for us to do
training?
that for anything that doesn't involve a student center.
So is it reasonable to say that that's annual training?
I would say yes, only because our staff changes so frequently, and I think it's important that everyone, including new employees, are aware of what to do if there is a disaster, which is why everything needs to be current and reviewed either every year or maybe every other year.
It would be helpful to know what staff, how that would work, and I'd like some input from staff before saying, as a board, we want it done every year. Don't know if we're ready or able to do that, but just to be able to say that. So I agree periodically and adding it to it and adding maybe a updated review, just to review this and update it once in a while. So, and determining how often it should be reviewed. So those are good additions or suggestions for this. I'm gonna go to trustee Irvin.
Yes, in that same vein with, when I was reading this and when you scroll down and you see it was last adopted in 2009, and we're talking about emergency preparedness and things like that, we have to have something in place to have this at the very minimum reviewed. I mean, every other year or something like that. We shouldn't, 11 years shouldn't go by before we revisit our emergency preparedness in terms of a board policy. And then also, I didn't see anything that where we link with local law enforcement and emergency preparedness.
That's in the AR, I believe.
Oh, okay. Must have missed it.
That's all right.
But yes, but
Well, I apologize. It's also on the second page, I believe, 3516A,
Okay.
where it talks about we will comply with SIMS guidelines and establish for multiple jurisdiction or multiple agency operations within the National Incident Management System.
okay.
Or would you like more than
Oh,
that?
I'm good.
Okay, trustee Newman.
I think that there's two issues we're talking about here. It's first of all, I want to make sure that Trustee Irvin maybe understands that just because we haven't updated the policy here doesn't mean the plan hasn't been updated. So that's two different things. So because I know that there's legal requirements of updating the plan. Isn't it every year? Isn't there? Yeah. So I think anything that the board policy says should not have any additional intervals. It should say at the end of the word emergency on this page here, it should say as required by law, because the state's going to tell us how often they need us to do that, and we're doing that. So that way, people who want some interval in here mentioned, it's there and it's as required by the law. And then, so the plan being updated. Okay, so that's the training as required by law. And the plan is updated as required by law too. So,
So where are you suggesting putting that?
okay, so the superintendent or designate, it's on the second page, the all red
Right, okay.
sentence. And so in the event of an emergency, as the superintendent shall provide training to employees regarding their responsibilities. Yeah, in the event of, as required by law. That way it's done whatever the state says how often you have to train people. And then in terms of how often the plan needs to be done, I think it's implied that it has to be maintained according to law in the second sentence on the first page. No, the third sentence on the first page. The superintendent or designee shall develop and maintain. Part of maintaining is that it would be updated. A disaster preparedness plan which contains routine and emergency disaster procedures. We are required each year to do that, right? And that's what the law says now, which they could say, oh, you know, there's so many disasters, you need to do that every 6 months. Let's hope not. But it's already in the law. So I'm not sure we want to add any other intervals that is required.
As long as we're doing it.
Use your
Yearly.
Yeah, because the duty of maintenance is the duty to obey the law as it's required to do it. So I'm not sure any additional language is added there. We could add the as required by law somewhere in that too.
We currently do run, for example, the AR around fire drills. We have monthly fire drills at K6. Child Welfare and Attendance communicates out to sites. We have regular scheduled fire drills as well as lockdown, as well as earthquake preparedness drills on a regular basis annually at all school sites.
How about here, like in
I think that's what Mr. Zierli was referring to earlier, in that there's still some work and planning around support staff.
Correct. We will be having our first fire drill for this complex in this month, February. It is planned, and that'll be the first one we have. So, and I just thank you, Trustee Newman, for pointing that out. We do have a disaster plan. We do have an emergency evacuation plan, and it is updated annually. So it's there. This brings the board policy, or it will bring the board policy into alignment with everything you're talking about.
Okay, so moving on to Trustee Walker.
I think y'all have covered most of it. All I was gonna say is if we're gonna do intervals and put something, I think the place to do it is in the AR. In the sense that as I'm flipping through that, there are iterated lists of what Mr. Godot just said. And there's actually references to training of staff on this cardiopulmonary CPR stuff. We've got the ADS things up on the walls, and if there's a specific training that we are doing, then just have staff lifts it up in the AR so it's there. Because I would agree, they're doing it. My kids know where they go when the bells ring, and sometimes they agree with it and sometimes they don't. I think it depends on the school site. Because I think one of the issues I always hear about when Enox does it is everybody floods to the middle. And my kids go, why are we all standing in the middle in one big group versus somewhere else? But that's the nature of the site. It is what it is. But I do know they do it because I hear about it. And then use the AR to iterate specifics, because I think that's where that belongs versus the board policy. Because that's the actual, what they're doing versus what we've given direction to.
Good suggestion. I agree with that. Now, so are there any more comments from the board?
Approval of the first reading on that?
Move for approval, and should we add the as required by law in that second
Yes.
page
Yeah.
at the end? Okay,
Yeah.
just checking. And so, and does staff know where that is? Okay,
Yes.
just making sure. All right, so with that, I have a second from Trustee Brown. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item B3A, which is AR 3516.3, which is, goes along with this item.
Yes, this is 3516.5. This is as noted by the
0.5.
red font. This is new language as pulled by CSBA. And then also the CF 3543 listed at the bottom. Transportation Safety and Emergencies, that's coming back at a future board meeting, so that would be NA at this point in time.
So I had a question on this one, because on the page A of 3516.3A, at the bottom of the page, it has a paragraph. The superintendent or designee shall consider the danger of a post-earthquake to tsunami when developing and so I said, I don't know if we'll ever need that.
That's
Isn't that
I'm
with
sorry,
this
that's the AR.
Yes,
So that sentence is on the AR.
yes.
Is that before?
Oh, did I?
I'm sorry. Are we on
Emergency
BP 3516.5? Where are we at?
I
No,
am.
we're on B3A on
This is
the AR.
the change.
Yes, this was the added one.
Yes.
So
Sorry, my
3515.
mistake.
I know, I thought, wait, you're saying, okay.
This is an AR, and so as we're going through these 3000s, what we found was we had a puzzle created, and we have to break down that puzzle and put it back together with the appropriate either titles or numbers. And so this is one that goes with Board Policy 3516. There's a series of ARs. This is one of those, 35163, for Earthquake Emergency Procedure System. So I apologize. And this is the one that was pulled from consent and put into discussion. And as Trustee Marks pointed out on the second page, again, we used CSBA recommended language. There's some districts, probably in California, that could be impacted by a tsunami. So that's why it's there. Conventional wisdom would suggest we would not be. But we were impacted by a wildfire, and we're not really in a wildfire region. So, I mean, I don't have any concerns taking this out. That's the board's
If it's
recommendation.
that big, go.
All right, okay, Trustee Newman.
I kind of am inclined to say leave it because if there is a tsunami, it would impact other communities. It would impact us because we might be emergency sites for communities on the coast because we might be a safe place to land. So that I mean, that could be where this could mean that, this could I think it's pretty broad enough to include that, so I don't see a problem with it. The only thing I didn't see in this was if there is an earthquake, as I understand it, the bigger issue for our area is dam, the leak of a dam or the destruction of a dam. And this policy didn't contemplate
Right.
that per se. I think that sentence on the tsunami, it was, the water fallout from an earthquake is where that's contemplated. So maybe we just add the post-earthquake, tsunami or dam failure, I guess
Our
that's what
nearest
it's
one
called.
would be Don Pedro, right?
Yeah, and that,
South of us still too, right?
right, I'm not sure whether we would, there's
Almost
some.
like the controlled releases they did a couple of years ago where you had folks on South Side and different parts of the city where the rivers were gonna come up
Right.
because of the controlled releases, and that's not earthquake related, but like you're saying, if you had a problem, that's where it would come up, is the lower lying areas south of town where the rivers are due to a release for some unknown reason, and now you've got rising water levels, as we've seen many times over the years that we've been here. So I think
So
that's,
if you do an EMS training, those are the ones that we train for, are flooding,
Yeah.
fire, railroad, because we have a lot of railroads here. And so those three are the main ones that we have to prepare for here. And any road blockage and how you would isolate this area, so from further damage. And so that's how they prepare for it. And I agree with dam failure. In fact, when I read tsunami, I thought, actually, we'd probably have more struggles with the flooding from one of the dams up the hills from us.
And I will add to that, and back on the board policy 3516, where it references SIMS and NIMS.
Right.
I participate with Ed Miller as district representatives on that countywide training, and we have talked about the incident that Mr. Walker pointed out, and then also what to do, road closures or other type of water failures. So, but we can add it to the AR as well.
Yeah, just the dam failure, but the tsunami, if the tsunami gets to here, we're in way less, I don't think that's gonna be the least of our worries, and I don't think the board policy is gonna do anything for us at that point. But, yes, Trustee Irvin.
I was just gonna say something similar to that. I mean, we don't know that it can't or will not happen, because that's just the nature of the world in terms that we live in with global warming and all this other stuff. Who knows? A tsunami, could happen, and we could be impacted by it. Like Trustee Newman said, the fallout from that, from that. So we definitely need to be prepared and definitely recognize the possibilities of it as well.
All right, so we have the addition of or dam failure after tsunami, and I didn't hear anybody disagreeing with that. So with that addition, I'll entertain a motion to approve this AR 3516.3.
So moved.
We have a motion by Trustee Walker, seconded by Trustee Irvin. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Moving on to item B4. Approval of the first reading of proposed draft of Board Policy 3516.5, emergency schedules.
Okay, now we're at
Back.
3516.5.
Yes.
My apologies for that. This is new. We did not have this particular board policy before. Again, it goes along with the emergency disaster preparedness 3516. So this is all brand new language. Again, at the bottom of the first page, CF 3543, that should be an NA, as that is coming in the future for board approval.
Any questions from board members? I just was wondering about adding fog days to the bottom of this page because we deleted the fog one in our, because it says this was the only other place that I thought it fit. And I know I asked staff about this earlier, but it says the superintendent designee shall establish a system for informing students, parents, guardians when school buses are operating as scheduled. Not operating, sorry, I missed the word, not operating as scheduled. The school day schedule is changed or the school is closed. And I don't know if you'd have, due to weather. And so I know in this area, fog can be one like we had this morning. Trustee Newman? Oh, I didn't see Chad's. Okay.
I think it's broad enough that it could include anything regarding weather or fire or anything, because anything could delay school buses as operating as scheduled. The school day schedule is changed or school is closed. So air, you have fire, fire, air quality. So this is broad enough to include fire, fog. Heaven forbid it starts, freezing rain. So
Right.
there's ice on the road. Global warming, we don't know about some weird weather phenomenon that can happen. So I think I would support leaving the language as is because it's broad enough to encompass that whole host of weather and whatever that could come to us.
Trustee Brown?
So as I read policies, I continually go through the what-if scenarios, and I'm just curious how we are set up to notify parents. So with cell phone technology, I'm sure we are better off than we ever have been. But in the event of a full power outage, do we have an ability to be in contact with parents?
Yes, good question. So our school messenger system will still work because even with the school messenger system that we use to deliver emergency or even just regular updates to parents, it's all done with auto dialers, and that's actually a cloud-based system. So it's based on the web. So anywhere that we have web access, we'd be able to use it. So even if there were a full power outage and say Wi-Fi was down, we would still have cellular connectivity, I'm thinking. We'd be able to update it that way. So we do have different scenarios that we could still implement. Yeah.
Trustee Newman?
And I think just to note as a parent at this point, the way we're able to communicate with our parents and students is pretty comprehensive through text, through emails, through phone calls. So, and any given phone number that we've given the district, they get the phone calls. So we're truly trying to reach out. It's increased every single year that my kids have been in the system.
Yes. Could you add the board, our cell phones to that so we get those? Well, some of us. I used to get them all the time, and it helped me when parents would call me. I'd be, oh yeah, I didn't know that was going on at your school site. You've sent us emails. Maybe we don't want to have them because there's so many now than there used to be. But just or just do one school and say, okay, at least you're informed in your school area, or your trustee area would be informed. Okay, I understand that. Thank you. She's like, I do not want all those texts. I already get this many.
Well, and you get an email on each of those, so you,
Yes.
within the day.
Yeah, I do. I read those emails. Trustee Walker.
I was just going to echo that point because I don't need the extra.
Okay.
Because again, as a parent, I get, and you're right, it does come in, and it's a computer thing because the sequence is always the same. My phone goes off, my wife's phone goes off, then the text message comes in, then the phone call comes in, and then I go check email. And so for every single incident, there's 3 occurrences for each parent, including the message. And that's just for one school, and that's a plenty. It just makes sense because it is very systematic. We know when the phones start going off in the sequence,
That's helpful.
and it's the same sequence every time,
Yes.
and it's plenty.
Yes. So I do have a, I just do recognize that if there is an emergency and everyone tries to make phone calls, I do not know if the phone service still has capability of handling that, because I was in a 6.9 earthquake on the coast in California, and I do know that all of our phones were available for about 5 minutes, and then we overloaded the system, and then none of us could call. And then all the power went out, all the electricity went out, and all the gas stations couldn't pump gas. So I know we were isolated for a while because of that. So I don't know if we have a system in place in the event that no one can communicate. I know that was a big deal during Columbine and then some school shootings thereafter on communicating with one another. They found out that all their cell phones would not work, that teachers did, and so they had actually a walkie-talkie system that they were still able to communicate with one another. Their PA system still worked, but the concern was that they could not, the teachers that were in certain rooms could not get any information out as to how they were, and so that was a concern. I don't know when we do our emergency preparedness plan, but I believe that should be something that you're already discussing and might have a plan of communication. So that's just a concern. It doesn't need to go in the schedules, but that's just something that when you were speaking, that I have experienced and that I've spoken with teachers in schools that had that happen. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Ms. Noonan. Trustee Irvin?
Along those same lines with President Marks, do we have satellite phones available for use in a situation like that? Because when cellular is down and the other things are down, satellite phones are usually.
We do not.
We do not currently.
I think
It's-
law enforcement or other government agencies might.
Probably.
Yes, I know they do.
We do have the old analog lines that the old phones that you plugged in, and so like the fax machines use, and even with the powers out, the analog lines still work. So we do have a way to communicate. You got to plug in the old phone, the old rotary phone, but those do work in the event of a power outage.
Oh, okay. Is it a possibility of maybe having a satellite phone available just in case that would get us in contact with law enforcement and other,
We're going to be meeting in the next month or so with the Emergency Operations Committee, and that's a group that has TIM, Student Support Services, basically every one of the divisions is represented in there. And we'll talk specifically about some of these scenarios in terms of recommendations on what we need to do going forward. But communications is in there. We would also have Russ Selkin in there from a technology standpoint that could obviously give us a better idea on how to respond.
Trustee Walker?
I think you just hit on where I was going, is that I think in the situation we're talking about now, and I was in the Bay Area during Loma Prieta also, if it's that full tilt boogie thing going on, then the police are already involved, and you've got your NIMS, you've got your simulations, everybody's fired up, they're moving in. I would have to imagine in that scenario they're going to move to our school sites by default, and that it's a much bigger issue than what we've done as a board in a meeting on a Saturday, that it's a more regional issue, and all hands on deck takes care of that sort of issue, if that makes sense. Because at that point, we're not driving the issue anymore anyway. It's been handed off to local law enforcement or local whomever, fire, blah, 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 sheriffs. And we're taking our direction from them at that point just by default.
Many of our school sites are identified in disaster relief plans as a place where community emergency services would be provided, evacuation, et cetera. So,
Which goes back to the previous one we were talking about with the, the water rising. When that happened 2 years ago, we, as far as board communication, I had asked a question and we all got an email that laid out which sites were low-lying and where we were moving people to higher level sites because of the flood release on the waters and the Tuolumne and the rivers. And so all that's there underneath. And I think us sort of micromanaging it at this level, if it's that big of a deal, we're sideline watching anyway and taking our direction from somebody else.
Yes. Trustee Lopez?
Yeah, I had a question on. I mean, we talk about what would happen in the case that we lose power, but for important buildings, do we? I mean, all buildings are important, but I'm talking about where we centralize a lot of our information. Do we have generators in the district office or in some schools where we can keep going a couple hours after a shut off?
I'm not aware of any backup generators that we have in the district that would provide alternative power in that event.
I'm not aware of backup generators that would provide power like an office space, but we do have battery backups with the tech. So I know like our school sites, so servers don't necessarily crash immediately if there's a power outage. And I'm just referring to Gregoria. My knowledge there was that there were battery backups if power were to go down, that it would sustain it for a limited amount of time.
So, I mean, for instance, what we tend to deal with a lot is if there's a school that is without power, we'll be monitoring that, and then Nutrition Services will pull any perishable products from that site and bring them to the central location. But I'm not aware of any portable generator systems that we have that we could plug into to provide emergency power in that situation.
No, haven't needed it. Okay.
Medically fragile, the devices that we purchase for our kids at some of the programs in John Udis, Sonoma, Gregory Johansson, they all have backup batteries, backup generators. So what would end up, or not generator, I apologize, backup batteries. So if something were to go out, there's a shelf time in terms of when we would still be able to provide that level of support, and then we would obviously be calling for, asking for assistance at that point, but it would not just shut off.
Okay.
And I know at Davis High School there are, or there were, backup generators, I think diesel or gas operated directly behind the gym because Davis was designated as an emergency center site, what have you, but I don't know if that, so maybe that's something that you could add with your conversations with emergency services. I don't know if that's still something that is tested regularly, but it was 20 years ago.
Trustee Walker?
Is that just as a side note, the place to go if you needed one was go find your band boosters or your sports boosters, because when they travel, they carry the little generators with them, and there's probably about 30 of them sitting outside of Enoch's right now because they're having a regional color guard competition, and every single crew will have a generator sitting there. And so if you ever get in a spot, run over to the band or the football room, because there's somebody in there has one, because they have to run their concessions and all those other things, and so they're laying around here and there. And I think Brad's point on the computer thing is that's where it comes into the safety plan and the emergency plan is, yes, there's a battery backup on the server, but it's also somebody's job to know that when this battery, when it goes off, you've got an hour and a half to go down there and shut down the server correctly so everything gets taken care of. Because that's the second tier of that process, is that battery backup's going to last 45 minutes. You got an hour to go down there and shut this thing down correctly so that you don't lose anything.
All right, thank you. So, without any more comments, we're ready for a motion to approve Board Policy 3516.5. It's been moved by Trustee Newman. Is there a second? Trustee Walker, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item B5, approval of first reading of proposed draft of Board Policy 3530, risk management / insurance.
This board policy is new to us. We did not have one identifying risk management and insurance. However, we have been operating a risk management and insurance program, and then this board policy says that we shall establish a program that uses effective safety and loss control practices. We do that, and we plan to do that, but this just brings us in line with the existing CSBA number and language.
Question from Trustee Brown.
Okay, I'm the timing and accountability watchdog, I guess. So it says in this policy that the superintendent or designee shall report to the board twice a year on district's risk management activities. The lifesaver's getting in my way, sorry. So when and how?
Well, I can say the majority of these you hear in closed session. So I think it's informed throughout the year in closed session, and then also board communications.
That is true, and we do. This is something that I mean, we have reports coming to the board monthly, different divisions or programs. We do have a safety inspection done that's annually, and that is new, I believe, procedure for the district, and we can definitely calendarize that and bring the results of that annual safety report to the board. It is something that we're now doing each year.
Trustee Newman.
Is this twice a year required by the code?
I will look into that. I'm not sure. I mean, I know in my past, I've personally never been in a district that's done this twice a year.
Yeah.
So
It seems like that's a lot for some sort of formal report, and so I like the idea that we're reporting regularly because as issues arise. Moreover, I think the important time for us to look at this is upon renewal of our risk management, your risk insurance, our liability insurance. So we just went through that,
Yes.
but when we changed, and with appreciate our business services, we kind of did a comprehensive review of that at this, and so I that's why I am not comfortable with the twice a year. Regular, I would rather it say regularly. So I would delete twice a year if that's not required by law. The superintendent or designee shall report to the board regularly on the district's risk management activities, because that's what we really do. And that way, regularly or as needed, because we need to be advised of any liability, any cases, or that kind of thing. And we're advised a lot on this. So the twice a year just stuck out to me as strange. And I don't really need a report per se on all of it, because if I'm being advised regularly, then that's better than somebody spending a bunch of time and making a comprehensive report. I guess annually, if we, how much of our, how much have we spent of our deductible perhaps would be relevant. But I don't like twice a year.
Trustee Brown.
So if there is some requirement that we do it annually, I mean twice a year, then I think we need to have it have a specific calendar, like we'll just say it's going to be in these two board meetings.
So if I may, in looking at the notes in CSBA, that can be revised to more or less frequent reporting. So it's doesn't appear to be requirement to be twice a year.
Trustee Newman.
I would suggest we delete twice a year to regularly, because that's our duty in our closed session. I think that's what we're doing. And then if the law changes, we can change it to shall report to the board regularly on the district's risk management activities as required by law. That way, covers it.
So adding required by law.
Well, we could add that, but at this point, I don't think we need to. So what we could do is if the law changes and requires it at regular intervals, we could just say as required by law, because when they change the law and require something in an interval, you have to assume they're going to change the intervals. So if you just say as required by law, then the policy is flexible enough, you don't have to keep revisiting it. So, which staff is like, yeah. So, but regularly just gives us the flexibility to keep doing what we're doing. And then, as required by law would be only put in if we realize that it has to be done by law at some regular interval.
Trustee Walker?
And so I did exactly what I think you said, is I just crossed out twice a year and put in as needed. Because as Mr. Zierli said, if you look at the CSBA notes, it's a customizable part of the policy. A lot of them will say this paragraph can be modified to meet district needs. And so you just, twice a year becomes as needed until we have to go to a required by law thing. Because it's not a required by law thing, it's an optional bit, so it's as needed. Just to the board as
I prefer
needed.
regularly.
I prefer
As to-
regularly
as
because
to-
it better reflects what we do.
Yes.
Or regularly, so
Because
one
it's
word instead of two.
It's part of our, I mean, if you look at any of our agendas, it's part of our regular agenda.
But I understand your as needed, so thank you. Okay, without any more comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion to approve, wait a minute, let's see, it's Board Policy 3530 by Trustee Newman.
With the changes.
With the change of the changing twice a year to regularly. Is there a second? I have a second by Trustee Irvin. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, moving on to item B6, approval of first reading of proposed deletion of Board Policy 3531, workers' compensation coverage.
Yeah, this is an existing board policy that covers workers' compensation. You're probably wondering why in the world we just passed a risk management policy. Why are we deleting this? This is one of those things that there is a board policy 1240 that specifically covers volunteer assistance and workers' comp and what the district provides. So that will be covered and should be covered in that board policy. There is no corresponding CSBA board policy 3531, so we're proposing to delete.
So
this
do
language.
we already pass Board Policy 1240?
I don't believe so. I would need to check on that.
Okay,
but
so.
and this is
this-
something we
yeah.
do. I mean, through
Right.
through HR, we have a procedures for volunteers. Once our volunteers are approved as volunteers, they are covered under our risk management system. So it is going on with or without this board policy. It is happening.
Okay, so I'm just going to make a statement. I prefer that if we are going to delete a board policy, that we have a replacement on that same agenda item, so that we don't go without a board policy on a certain item. This one, because we're already doing this, I'm still uncomfortable with it, but I'll vote to delete this one. But I don't like deleting something without having the replacement ready to go. I just feel like it's getting the cart before the horse, and we're doing it in the wrong order. So if we have a replacement, then I go, okay. So trustee, go ahead, trustee.
Mr. Shirley, what
I
was
mean,
the
super-
board policy that replaces this? I'll have Mr. Henderson look to see if it's.
1240. It's under community relations. 1000.
Would you look to see if when we can get that?
So it's on workman's comp coverage for authorized volunteers, but I could see that it would be for community. While you're looking that up, trustee Walker?
And I think part of this, because I just looked at the next 6 or 7 just to check my dates, this is really about letting go of the 80s.
No.
Because all of these are 82, 83, 81, and I think we have to let go of the 80s. And that's your Saturday humor point, but in all reality, there's one that we have one that's out there that I'd like to get to at some point. It's the oldest one on the books. It's 1977. But I do think we need to let go of the 80s.
As Trustee Walker points out, I mean, that was our intent as we were going through these updates, to remove ones that were not relevant, at least relevant by means of the number from CSBA. It doesn't exist. There is not in existence a board policy 3531 for workers' compensation. It's not required. So that was what we were doing, is we were removing ones that weren't required by having that board policy. And then, of course, there is some lag time before, and then there's a couple coming up just after this where And I understand your point, but again, we are doing this. I don't know if that makes you comfortable or not as a board member, but I mean, we do have procedures and policies in place to deal with approving our volunteers. We have a lot of volunteers, obviously, for a district our size, and our workers' comp coverage does cover them once they're approved as volunteers.
So that's where I'd like to see the board policy just with it that says we're replacing this one with a new board policy that is whatever it is, or we don't do this anymore, so we're deleting it. The purpose of it is no longer valid. So I can see that from maybe something from the 70s where we might be using telephones.
Yes. And you know what I
instead
think,
of-
and then part of that is, the second piece of that is that, and certainly from a legal point of view, there is no way that the law is the same today as it was in 1980 when it comes to workers' comp or anything. So having something that old is almost misleading to a certain degree, because we're clearly not doing it that way. You know, because if we were, we would be completely in the wrong, because there's just no way that 40 years down the road, that's what it is versus what it was versus what we do. And so just move them down the road, because there's no way it would line up with what current practices are, no matter what it is, certainly on HR.
Yes. So did, Mr. Henderson, did you find board policy 1240?
We do not have a 1240 on the books. We have a 1250 about visitors and outsiders.
Oh,
It
okay.
doesn't speak specifically to a coverage or liability. It's procedures for approving and procedures for them visiting campuses and so forth, which would apply to volunteers.
Okay, that's great. All right, and it covers probably some kind of insurance in case something happens, but it may not say it in that. Okay, so, Trustee Brown?
So I'd like a clarification on our workers' comp policy to inform us whether or not it does cover outsiders, visitors, or volunteers. I know from a private business policy, it would not.
We have a process to approve volunteers, I believe through the Human Resources Department. And then, yes, there is in our policy, we do offer coverage for those that are approved volunteers. Now, we have a lot of volunteers that may not have, but if they've been fingerprinted, they've been TB tested, they're on the approved volunteer list. Our workers' comp coverage does provide coverage while they're doing school-related duties as a volunteer.
So that would be the accident benefit coverage as opposed to payment coverage? Because
Yeah,
volunteers are not paid.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't see any more lights, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the deletion. Wait a minute. First reading of proposed deletion of board policy 3531, workers' compensation coverage. Do I have a motion? Trustee West has moved. Trustee Walker. Sorry, I looked back that way and then came back this way. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Moving on to item B7, approval of first reading of proposed deletion of board policy 3541.5, use of district vehicles for school-related trips.
Yes, this is a previous board policy, 3541.5. There is no reference of CSBA 3541.5. There is 3541.1 that is scheduled to come to the board in the future. So whatever the language here is listed in a future board policy that is coming forward. It was scheduled to be at a board meeting in April. But I know we've changed the way we're bringing forth board policies. So, but it is scheduled. It is on the update list to be updated at a future board meeting, 3541.1.
Okay, Trustee Newman?
Okay, I tend to agree with Trustee Marks on this one, that we ought not to delete this, because the use of our school buses for various field trips has been an issue on this since the time I've been on the board. And so this just says that this is how we'd make a decision of when there's a conflict. And so until we have that other policy in place, I think we have to have a policy that says how we'll make the decision.
Yes, so my suggestion is to move this to the board meeting when we do approve the new board policy. So, I need a motion to
So
table
moved.
this one. Okay, trustee Walker makes a motion to move it to a future board meeting, seconded by trustee Newman. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. So this item is moved to the future board meeting. Item 7A, this was the AR 3541.5.
So I would assume then this would be the AR that follows this board policy, which will be non-existent, which
Yes.
is why it's lined out. So I would assume this AR would be the same
Yes, so we
action
will,
by the board.
plan to move this to the next, to that same night when we delete. We will delete these items when we have a new board policy to replace them. So do I have a motion to move AR 3541.5 to a future meeting?
So moved.
Trustee Walker moves, seconded by trustee Newman. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. Moving on to item B8, approval of first reading of proposed deletion of board policy 3542.1, restriction on driver eligibility.
So 3542.1, 3543.1, 3543.2, and 3543.3. Again, these are all, they don't exist. They were proposed to be deleted to make way for a new board policy. So if you want to take these, if you want to just remove these, and we'll bring them
Yes.
back for deletion when the new language comes forward.
I would appreciate that. Okay, so these are B8, is it B9 and B10 and B11?
It is through,
B12 is also deletion.
no, it would be
It's
through
just
B,
11.
B11.
Yeah, this is all transportation. Okay, those are all relating to transportation. So, do I have a motion to remove items B8, B9, B10, and B11? Oh, do I have a trustee Walker?
So the fog is staying? We're keeping our foggy policy?
We,
That's what we're saying, right?
yeah, there's no, obviously, I mean, going back to the tsunami reference.
Okay.
There's no reference to fog in any CSBA
Okay.
language.
And that's
we,
fine,
We
I'm
do
just-
follow. We do have procedures that we follow in the event of fog. It's actually, we'll come back in a reference. It's called atmospheric
Yeah.
conditions, and just vehicle code governs that. If it's at or below 200 feet, that's when our restrictions kick in. We do follow those, so that was.
You're
reason-
saying that this was, there's not gonna be a policy coming back to replace foggy because there is no foggy
Because
guy.
there is no, again,
So why are
all
we
these being deleted.
tabling this?
Okay, that's fine. Okay, so we will not table, let's see, wait.
Well, there is a board policy coming back, 3543, that talks about atmospheric weather conditions and visibility. So you can say that's fog.
Okay.
You can say that's whatever you want that to be.
So we're tabling all four of these.
Yes. It will be covered in that board policy that's coming up.
Okay.
I don't have a dog in the fight one way or the other, but go ahead, trustee Newman.
Trustee, yep.
I'm of the opinion that we table 3542.1, the restriction on driver eligibility, because that could be a continued problem. Transporting items on school buses, that can be a continued problem. But the foggy conditions, because I think we cover that. And then we can't buy a car that doesn't have seatbelts, so that's kind of irrelevant. So I'm okay with deleting 3543 right now. I mean, how long has that been in effect? 3543.2.
Okay.
That was written in 1982. Maybe there were some cars in existence, but at this point, I think it's against federal law for any cars to be sold without that. So, yeah.
You could get in a car with a clothes hanger back then.
Yeah, all passengers are required to wear the safety belts. Well, that's required by law too.
The only thing, and you're right, that when we bring back a board policy, it'll talk about vehicles, which includes buses, and so that law has changed. I mean, buses now we have to purchase with safety restraints. Obviously, we don't. There's no requirements for us to make sure they're being worn, but it will be covered. Safety belts on vehicles will be covered in a future board policy. But you're absolutely right. It is the law. We are complying with the law for all of our district-owned vehicles.
Okay, so then the motion is to table 3542.1 and 3543.3
Yes.
for future discussion, and deleting 3543.2 and 3543.1.
I'll second that motion.
All right, so it's been moved by trustee Walker, seconded by trustee Newman to delete those two items that he just said, B8 and B11. Wait, no, delete, say it again. Yes,
Safety
So-
belts in district-owned
Yes.
vehicles and foggy weather conditions on
Right.
school bus services are to be deleted.
yes.
The ones that are being tabled are restrictions on driver eligibility and transporting items on school buses.
Yes. Okay, so let's vote on the, okay, so all those in favor of removing those two and keeping, and vote, and deleting the two that are on there, how we said it. Please say
Okay,
aye.
so the
Yes.
motion is to delete the policy on,
Read the policy number.
yes, I
Yes.
did that once and I did the name, so let me get it back.
Board policy 3543.
3543.2, safety belts in district-owned vehicles. 3543.1, foggy condition, weather driving school bus services. The motion is to delete.
Yes,
The motion to table is 3543.3, transporting items on school buses, and 3542.1, restriction on driver eligibility.
yes.
I
So,
second that
and
motion.
trustee Newman seconds that. All those in favor, please say aye. and raise your
Aye.
hand. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, moving, passes unanimously. Item B12, approval of first reading of proposed deletion of board policy 3556, eligibility for cafeteria services.
So in September of 2019, we brought to the board 5 board policies for approval: 3550, 3551, 3552, 3553, and 3555 that covered this. This was not, at that time, this was not, it was overlooked to be deleted, so now we're bringing that back. It is covered by
Yes.
already approved revisions to board policies for nutrition services. So we just recommend that this be deleted.
Trustee Newman?
I recommend, I make a motion for
Oh,
deletion of
put
this policy.
she recommends to delete this board policy, the proposal to delete this board policy.
I make a motion.
She makes a motion to do that. Trustee Lopez seconds that. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. Item B13, approval of first reading of proposed draft board policy 3580, district records.
This is new to us, 3580. We did not have a board policy around district records and maintaining and securing district records. So it's all new language to us as recommended by CSBA.
Any questions? Trustee Newman?
Okay. It's on page 2, and it's just, okay, that if the district discovers there's been a breach of security, I totally agree, we shall make every attempt to notify, but it shall notify. So, we don't, if this happens from records from 1990, we don't, I mean, we're going to do the best we can. But, it's very difficult. I had this happen. My college notified me that, oh, by the way, your identity's been compromised because we allowed something to happen. And so they sent something to my parents' address, and because that was their last known address for me. So that shall notify language is so, it's so narrow. And so I'm not sure if we should put it as shall
Make every effort?
make reasonable efforts to notify.
Yes.
I mean, there's some sort of reasonable thing, because the reality is our students are very mobile, and there's going to be a big chunk of them we are not going to be able to do that. The reality is that's that's just the nature of it. So, I would, shall notify needs to be modified.
Okay, trustee Walker?
My concern with that is if you dig into the underlying law, everything I've read on all of these topics say you shall notify, and I think it's not an issue of us saying we can or can't. You shall notify. And I think that, I get your point, but there's a second part of this that goes into other board policies where there's a requirement that we maintain records and that we delete records. And I think it's a difference because if a student moves on from us, their CUME file follows them. We don't maintain it. And so once they leave, we are actually supposed to be purging certain records. And so you wouldn't necessarily have all that. The concern I have on your point is a bigger piece, which I'll get into after we come through this, but everything I've read on the FERPA, the COPA, the SOPIPA, the PPRA, and all the other acronym student data privacy stuff, shall notify, shall notify, shall notify, and a parent has the right to request that they want a record purged, they want limited access, and so all those things are sort of underneath the table here. And I think that's why that is. I've never read it any other way.
So, to echo that point, I mean, it references Civil Code 1798.29, and it says districts are required to disclose any breach of security of any records that contain personal information as defined. But then it goes to say a district may maintain its own notification procedure as part of an information security policy, provided that the notification is consistent with the requirements in Civil Code 1798.29 regarding timing of notification. So,
It is required then.
we may be able
Just
to,
how?
yes, if there's another policy or policy we can create as far as timing that would satisfy Trustee Newman's concerns.
I mean, I'm not, we do have a duty to notify. I'm not suggesting we don't. I'm just concerned about the reality of doing it, given our, we have a high mobility population that we are serving. And so even notifying them from one year to the next could be quite difficult at some of our sites. And knowing that, I'm just trying to create language that doesn't walk us into a corner we can't get out of.
And
Trustee
so then
Walker?
maybe the option is that what Mr. Zierli just said is that it has a piece that says we can have an internal policy there. Is that the internal policy says all efforts are made to notify them. If you can, it documents that you couldn't. And I think that gives you the out clause that you're sort of looking for. Say, yes, we're following this. Our internal policy is that we will attempt and make every effort to notify somebody if there's a breach. And if you can't, you make a note of it. Because I think the flip side of this is that, and this goes with a package of policies. And this goes back to my issue of saying no at the last board meeting on the technology thing, and the superintendent's working on it. I have submitted a request for an agenda item to address this entire issue of student records, and this goes down in the CFs. Which one is it? It's 5-1. It's not 5-1. It's I forget which one. 5125, student records confidentiality, which we have already passed. This policy at the bottom has a reference to FERPA. FERPA is the weakest link of all the acronyms. 5.1, it doesn't include technology because it was written in the 80s. 5125, which is a CF here, has a reference to COPA. COPA has all the requirements that we're supposed to notify parents that we're giving permission to let their data go out. This is student records which are going in a cloud, which makes me nervous. And I think the other thing that makes me really nervous about all of this is now, based on the last board meeting, we're going into business with Google. There's nobody on this earth that is a bigger purveyor of taking, stealing, selling, and collecting data on this earth than Google. And so those are my underlying concerns about this whole package. And for the two people that were here when I interviewed that I didn't get the position to interview for the board, I mentioned Google and Google Docs. For what it's worth, in my day job, we're not allowed to do any work on Google Docs because it's not secure. It's not safe. And so as we go forward and look at these privacy and student data issues and getting into bed with Google, my concerns are going to be that high because there's a reason why we're not allowed to use them. No government work is allowed to be done on Google Docs. And there's a reason for that. And so this whole big package to me is a bigger piece. and we'll sort of come back to it. Superintendent's working on it, and I sort of provided some examples of what other school districts are doing, because it really is a big deal. Because if we're putting everything up on a cloud, that means somebody else is managing it, which means all of our data is sitting somewhere on a server somewhere else. And there's a lot of it, and it's a lot of student data, and it's a lot of personal data, and third parties, and contractors, and vendors, and apps. And I think we heard at the last meeting, you're integrating LMSs like PowerSchool, the curriculum, you get notifications if your student's off campus. And so we really do have a lot of student data sitting out there on these servers that does make me nervous. And that's a bigger concept within this issue. And I think Chad's talked about for what counts as metadata versus what doesn't. It's very broad. And the new law that just got passed in January in the state, superintendent was asking about earlier this week, they didn't have an answer for it. It actually requires vendors to tell you all the way down to the third-party levels now, which wasn't required before. And that took effect in January. So there's a lot of work to be done here, at least from my perspective, to how we protect versus notify, because that's my bigger concern, is how are we protecting and are parents aware of what we're storing? Because this isn't 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you didn't collect all this data. There's mountains of student data out there now that wasn't there before, that we didn't have to watch out for. And now everything is logged. It's on servers. It's sitting out there. And some 15-year-old is going to figure out how to hack it at some point. It won't be an adult. It'll be a 15-year-old. With that said, I'll move to approve this.
Okay, so we're going to approve it, keeping the word shall. Are we adding a clause that says according to district procedures? I was trying to go by.
Mine was, shall make reasonable effort to notify every individual. And, the board policy, all board policy infers that there's district procedures and ARs that underlie that. This is just, it's softening shall notify, because like the reality is we may not be able to. So I don't know what we do if we can't. So this just says we're going to make reasonable efforts to do it.
Yes, I was just trying to go by what Mr. Zerly read about the law and how the law said shall, but according to the district procedures. So, but if that is satisfactory to the board to make reasonable effort, then that's the, Trustee Brown seconds that. Trustee Walker?
I was going to say, because I think it's a motion to pass and a second to approve, with the board direction being, if you can't, there's a policy that says you can note that you made the effort, just so it's a record. Because I think that's the problem, is what I think Amy's talking about, is that we cover our backsides here. And so that there's at least a record of it. And I think that makes good sense, and that would be good business practice no matter what we were doing. And with that said,
Okay.
I'll second the first, second, all those in
All right,
favor?
okay, all those in favor, please say aye, raise your
Aye.
hand. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving, and trustee, Newman motion, trustee Brown second. Sorry, I may not have said that. I would like us to take about, let's see, a 10-minute break.
Okay, then
So we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll
that's all
come
that's
back, and we're gonna go till 10:44.
Yes.
And I'll see you back.
Again, the goal was to get out of here.
And we'll start
My
at
bucket list
B14.
number was 11:30. Noon was the real end.
We didn't buy lunch.
No, I,
Get out.
you know.
Yeah.
See?
Welcome back. Welcome back. We're on item B14, approval of first reading of proposed revision of Board Policy 3600, consultants. Mr. Zerly?
Thank you. Board Policy 3600 is being revised to bring it forward with current practices and law as recommended by CSBA. And in particular, I think for the most recently passed legislation or effective legislation, AB 5, which is the new employee contractor verification law. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions from board members? Trustee Walker?
Only since you brought it up, and to be humorous, we'll see how long that stays on the books as a law, and we'll come back and revisit it when they undo that. Because I actually read, I think last week, that there's a movement to undo that entire mess. And so, because it is quite overreaching and affecting a lot of small business. So my expectation is that will change in the future at some point. But otherwise, if there's no other comments, we'll just move forward.
Trustee Newman?
Okay, with regard to that part on independent contractor, that's kind of 1, 2, 3. That's kind of the way the law has been for some time, and so I don't anticipate that any huge changes there if the law does revise for what you're talking about. There was additional things in that law that so this has been kind of independent contractor versus employee law for a long time. Okay, there's just a couple of like typo type things. So I'm on page 2. It looks like the period at the end of approval on that first sentence that's in black got deleted. So that needs to be put back in. And then, okay.
And then independent at the bottom of the page?
Yeah, it needs to be
Capital.
capitalized. And I'm wondering whether, because this is, they use words here, independent contractors, and then, we sometimes call them consultants too. I guess no, we're deleting all the word consultant. Okay, so just, capitalizing independent contractors. And then you go to page 3, we've substituted out all independent, the word consultant to independent contractor, but then on page 3, the all red there, any consultant hired by the district. Okay, so should that then read any independent contractor hired by the district who's subject to the filing requirements? Because we've just called it all these people we hire independent contractors, and then all of a sudden we switch to consultants. So we probably should so my suggestion here is we either use consultant and independent contractors throughout, or just stick with independent contractors, delete the word consultant here, and substitute the word independent contractor. Just because if we have an independent contractor who's hired by the district who's subject to the filing requirements. Otherwise, who's a consultant? Because we didn't really talk about that up above. So that would be my, I think it should be independent contractor there because that mirrors what we've done. So I would delete the word consultant and put in independent contractor. Any independent contractor hired by the district who is subject to the requirements of the district's conflict of interest code. Blah, blah, blah.
Would you do that to the top, to the
So
The
the very first
Titles.
paragraph.
Well,
consultants?
yeah, but then the first sentence says the use of consultant and other independent contractors. So, I mean, you could say independent contractors and consultants at the top there. Maybe that's a way to do it. And then we just call them independent contractors throughout the way we've done it. Because we use the plural term here.
How about we do independent contractor as the title and then parentheses consultants?
Yeah, that would maybe work. So we delete that independent. So we'd put independent contractor there.
/ consultants.
No, let's
And
do
consultants?
no.
I
Just
still
do
like that
independent contractor there. Authorizes use of independent contractors, including consultants. You'd put, and then you don't need to put consultants anywhere. It authorizes the use of independent contractors, comma, including but not limited to consultants. And then that way we've we've included it. Two consultants.
So you're
So the first
suggesting-
sentence reads, the governing board authorizes the use of independent contractors, including but not limited to consultants, to provide professional advice or specialized technical or training. And then all the rest is all just independent contractors. So I think the top, we should delete the word where it's underlined and in bold, the very first word, it should be deleted. Independent contract, I think it should just say independent contractors and consultants, or I don't, or just say independent contractors. Yeah.
Yes, trustee Walker?
So then, with that logic, on page B, first, second, third paragraph down, there's a lot of mixing in there, so that has to be cleaned up as well, right? For consistency.
Where is that?
Page B,
Okay.
the third paragraph down, there's a lot of intermixing of both those words.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if we're being consistent, there's one more spot that needs to be touched.
Okay, yeah, that's that 1, 2, third paragraph, yeah. And that all just changes to independent contractor.
Okay, did you catch all that, staff?
I did.
Good with that? Okay.
So we currently use a consultant agreement, so I'm assuming we should change that to an independent contractor agreement. To change, if you read through that paragraph, it says the consultant agreement.
Yes,
So I'm
so
ass-
change it to independent contractor agreement. All right, so 2 lines out there in that paragraph. And then a change to independent contractor. Okay, so with those changes, do I hear any disagreement? So I entertain a motion to
So moved.
approve with the edits as we stated, and seconded by trustee Lopez. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously. Item B15, approval of first reading of proposed draft of Board Policy 7110, Facilities Master Plan. Mr. Associate Superintendent Zerly.
Thank you. This is the proposed first reading, as we did not have this before. And it is relevant, obviously, at this point in time with what we are doing with creating facility master plans. So this is the recommended language from CSBA. It does align with the what we're doing or did do. With that, I will answer any questions.
Any questions? Trustee Brown?
So the work that we've done in the past year, we looked at specific facility master plans for specific sites. Is this referencing a district-wide facility master plan? And how do we differentiate between those?
The advice from legal counsel, it says they're synonymous. And so, for instance, the Proposition 13, the bond measure Proposition 13, requires facility master plan to apply for funding. And we've been advised by legal counsel that our individual site master plans will suffice. So their belief is it's synonymous. It doesn't have to be a district-wide comprehensive facility master plan.
Okay. Okay, trustee Walker?
So that
Oh,
means it.
wait, trustee Brown
Yep.
still, okay.
So am I right in assuming that we have an intent to create that facility master plan for every one of our sites?
Yeah, absolutely. We are currently we've done 8. We are now going into the next 8. And then we will complete that.
Okay,
And then
and
we are
then-
also working independently outside of the measures on the high schools. We are doing one right now for Modesto High School as well. So.
And then does that also incorporate all of the facilities that are not school sites?
It does not. We don't have a master plan for auxiliary sites. And maybe that's something we need to look into.
I think at some point we need to look at a master plan for the district office and how we handle all district services.
Okay, trustee Walker?
So just to clarify what Mrs. Early said, so essentially it's either or both. In the sense that it's a master plan for the district, for a site, it's either or, it's sort of all encompassing.
We were obviously we were alarmed a little bit with the wording in Proposition 13, and so we asked that question, and we were told that our process will suffice. We don't need a one for all 34 of our school sites. So
Good enough.
Yeah. All right. So with that, do I have a motion to approve this item? Trustee Newman, motions. Trustee Brown, seconds. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item B16, approval of first reading of proposed draft of Board Policy 7140, Architectural and Engineering Services.
this is a new board policy for architectural and engineering services as outlined in the red font. It's new language. This is an example of, I mean, we've been securing architectural and engineering services for many years. And so this board policy now it establishes what we've been doing, but it wasn't in the form of a board policy before. So this is brand new language for services we're currently procuring when we look at our facility projects.
Trustee Walker?
Just one, that first CF says NA. We just passed that, so it can come off now, right?
Well, I wasn't sure until it actually got approved if you wanted to see it.
So it just seems like, I just figured it's in the package. Since we took some, we added NAs. We could subtract the NA. Work both sides of the equation. It's almost like algebra.
Okay.
So we'll delete the NA in that line. And then I will ask for, this true, it is the first reading, but if it passes, then we'll delete the NA. Okay. And then I have a question on the last sentence. The board need not select the lowest responsible bidder. Is that referring to leaseback?
No, these are professional services or specialized
Oh, right.
services
Okay,
that
yes.
are not part of the normal bid
Yeah.
requirement to procure the services. So that's the reason for that.
My brain was still on facilities, sorry. It's architectural and engineering, so that's good. All right, so is there a motion to approve, a motion to approve by trustee Brown, seconded by trustee Newman. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Item B17, approval of first reading of proposed draft of Board Policy 7210, Facilities and Financing.
Yes, this is a new board policy for us. However, as you read through it, you'll notice, I mean, we are currently involved in most, if not all of this language in order to provide funding for our facility improvements. So it's all brand new language, and it is existing with or in compliance with our current practices and it is as reported by CSBA for this particular board policy.
Okay, any questions from the board?
I'll just do a global one. Just a global on this one, the last one, and the next three. There's a bunch of NAs have to come out once we approve these and pass them because they're all over.
They do.
And they're all in here, and we're passing them all more or less. So I'll just call that a global comment going forward for the next three.
That's true.
So when we bring this back, would you like to see the NA removed?
No, just so as long as it gets covered. I got faith in you being able to delete
Remove it
3
for the
letters.
next- Yes, for the next item, remove it, yes. So you'll have a few on this page. Trustee Brown?
Just a tiny typo, the A on the second line needs to turn into an. An increased or projected increased enrollment.
Oh, got it.
Yes. Okay, with those changes for the future, do I have a motion to approve? Trustee Newman, seconded by trustee West. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. moving on to item B18, approval of first reading of proposed draft of board policy 7211 developer fees.
Again, this is a new board policy for us surrounding developer fees, which we currently have a process for charging and collecting developer fees for new projects within the boundaries of our district. This is recommended language, boilerplate language from CSBA, and we recommend approval of first reading.
Okay, any questions? Trustee Newman?
This is just kind of a form issue with how it is just that the phrase there, appeals process for protests by developers, that kind of hangs out there. We could delete that and then just have that last sentence. It just kind of hangs out there. It isn't really it
I
isn't
see.
underlined. It doesn't look like our other things. Let's just delete it and the sentence speaks for itself.
Oh, I see. Instead of having it capitalized with a line under it, or, I mean, bolded, yeah, it wasn't bolded,
Yeah,
so, okay.
it being that it's just one line and it's
Yes.
just one small policy. Okay, there it is.
Yes,
Less is better.
Yeah. And then there's a big space between facilities and needed, and I'm not sure, just kind of a typo there.
yeah, I noticed that too. Okay, with those changes, are there any other comments? Seeing none, so we'll delete the line, appeals process for protests by developers. That's the title of that next, before the sentence. And then would fix the space between facilities and needed in the first line. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by trustee Walker, seconded by trustee Newman. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Moving on, it passes unanimously. B19, approval of first reading of proposed draft of board policy 7212, Melrose.
So this is a new board policy number, 7212, but we did, in two agenda items down from here, we are deleting our old board policy number 7310, which was not the same reference as CSBA for Melrose District. So while this is all new and it's in red, but we will be deleting. We did have a board policy, obviously, for Melrose districts, and we will be proposing to delete that in the future agenda item.
Okay, and I know that were created when we created the Melrose district. Trustee Walker?
Just a general comment. I think we should delete all Melrose. As somebody who pays them. Otherwise, move to accept it.
Okay, motion's been made by trustee Walker to approve board policy 7212, seconded by trustee Newman. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Item B 20, approval of first reading of proposed draft of board policy 7213, school facilities improvement districts.
So again, this is a new policy for us for school facilities improvement districts. We have two currently. There's a potential for a third that will be formed here in the future. And so what this does is it goes along with the Melrose board policy. Sometimes they're called the same things, but this is a Melrose Community Facilities District. So it is establishing the SFID within the Melrose community is what this is for, which currently we have two. And there's a third potentially that will be coming forward for approval.
Okay, so when we do this also, we will have some deletions of those CFs in there because we will have approved the next
Okay.
board policies. Trustee Newman?
It's not deletion of the CF, it's deletion of NA.
Right,
Correct.
NA, sorry, NA, just the NA. Thank you for the clarification of that. Any other comments, questions from board members? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve board policy 7213. Is there a motion? Motion by trustee Brown, seconded by trustee Newman. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
It passes unanimously. moving on to item B20, approval of first reading of proposed draft board policy 7213, school facilities improvement districts. Wait, did I?
Nope.
Oh, this is oh, right, you're right. B21, sorry, approval of first reading of proposed deletion of board policy 7310, Melrose funding.
So, as previously noted, this was our existing board policy for Melrose funding. The board just approved first reading of board policy 7212, which aligns with the CSBA numbering and language for Melrose.
Yes. So,
I absolutely move that we should remove Melrose.
and this one in particular. So, and then we'll still have the AR coming on the next item, but, okay, so is there a motion to approve? Oh,
I
you
did,
made a motion, I'm
with a little
sorry.
bit of a smile.
Trustee Walker made a motion to approve. Trustee Newman made a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, to delete that one. That passes unanimously. Okay, last item, AR/E 7310. It should be almost the last, or the last item in your set of, all right.
So the intent of administration or staff for recommending deletion of this AR was we just proposed deletion of the board policy for this particular AR. The new board policy 7212 does not have or require a corresponding AR, which is why this was brought forward for deletion because board policy 7310 no longer exists.
So that's where my question comes in is there isn't an AR, and so staff is required to go, because this was a pretty extensive AR, and I know, I believe we referred to this when we, well, there were a lot of discussion about the Melrose and how that was gonna work in one of our Melrose areas, and with a lot of meetings with different city leaders, business leaders, and this was kind of a helpful document to be able to know how we were supposed to work on that. So since this is complete document is deleted, I thought, I didn't know if it was still needed and change the number to the board policy that is now, because it was only a number change basically for the Melrose one. But Trustee Newman, did you have a comment?
As I sat on the CFA board as
Yes.
well,
This was you.
I'm reticent to delete this as well. But I am concerned with any inconsistencies between an AR and the new board policy. The board policy, of course, control. So we haven't done a comparison. Staff hasn't done a comparison. So what my recommendation is, we approve a first read, that we don't delete it, we keep it in, and then we would have staff bring it back in a consent item. If there's
And I'm
anything.
not sure, and I apologize, I'm not sure what you mean by staff has not done a comparison.
There's
Staff-
no AR.
Yeah, staff did, yes, and staff did the board policy to make sure that complies with what we're doing. The language for the board policy was good. And you're right, this is there's no AR. There's not a required AR, and this is a very detailed AR. I mean, it's explicitly detailed to, and I'm assuming you were on the board that it was done for the creation of those two Melrose districts, or and so we can and staff has confirmed that this is the last time we did it. That's what we followed, and we will follow this for the next if there's a third community district. So we have no. I mean, it can be renumbered and aligned to the other board policy.
Okay, so here's my suggestion. I think it should be AR 72-112. And I think that we should look at it. I would like staff to look at it in comparison with BP 72-112 and make sure there's not an inconsistency in this versus what the board policy requires. And I just want to make sure they're aligned. Delete anything that you think, because this is AR and we're not technically supposed to be, necessarily be voting on this. So that's why I'm suggesting that just let's do a comparison with it, but keep a policy in place because it can only help you. Given what I know and what Cindy and I know. So it is better to have something that says this is what we're going to do, but make sure the language is consistent with what is in the board policy. And I haven't done that line by line analysis. So my motion is then to renumber this AR as 72112, keep it, and ask staff to do a line by line comparison with the board policy to determine that they are not in conflict, and then bring it back on a consent agenda.
Yes. Trustee Walker?
And that's exactly where I was going in a sense, because it is a tricky issue, especially for those of us who live in them. And maybe put an expiration date of 2027 on it when we're done with these things. Because my guess is you're never going to convince anybody in their right mind to get back into another Melrose CFD. It's just as somebody who lives in it, it's a nightmare. And my guess is you'd have a very difficult time convincing somebody to get back into one. And even being on the CFA board and having just done the SAFA thing with the folks in Salida, that people want out. And I think that, it's very difficult. I think even the builders have the option to step out of it now. And so when builders are building now, they're going to opt to not get involved with a Melrose or a CFD because of the negative connotations of it. So my guess is it just expires in 6 or 7 years and we say goodbye to it. So your point is well taken. And
Well, I don't know about that because in the newest development over in Village 1, that is in our CFD. So the one near Ustock School, that's what we
it's the last one.
Yeah, that was new to our CFD, that 1994 CFD. So so there are new homes that are going in even right now as they're finishing up the development of that housing unit.
I think the only one left after that would be the one in front of the old Save Mart, which they just keep rezoning every 18 months.
There's an additional area which has a proposed CFD.
Oh, the one way out on the edge.
So this could be around for a while, and so I would advise, given that there is a history of confusion.
Yes, there
about
is.
this in the community, that that we have a clear policy in place that that I just want to make sure that that follows our board policy and the law.
100% agree.
So but the reality is there's current projects that are in the CFD and there's a potential other one. So
better.
So this came about as a result of the downturn in the economy.
I remember.
And a lot of people, they wanted to kickstart the construction and building industry in the area. So this was formulated between 3 entities, the City of Modesto, the BIA, and Modesto City Schools, in order to help get that going. And so we agreed to it so that homes would cost less for homeowners, but that tax would go out for years, which you are the.
I own one of them.
You get to do that, so.
But it is. I think you're right, because it's confusing.
Yep.
It's high tension.
Yes.
It gets people very emotional, and it gets people agitated because it just has a very negative connotation. So having the AR makes sense, and I was just agreeing with that and hoping that it disappears in 27 and we don't deal with it again, because it just raises people's emotions.
But these are good guidelines to help. Trustee Brown?
Just a question that doesn't have anything to do with this vote, but Mr. Zerly, you've hinted at a third CFD group. Can you clarify to the board what that might be?
I believe it was just referenced.
Which area are we talking about? Is that the Riverbank?
Tivoli.
Yes.
Tivoli, yeah.
Yes.
Assuming, and again, they've been talking about that for years, and the question is, when does it kick off or not? Or if.
So Crossroads 2, is that separate
Let me.
as well?
I'll need to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
I'll need to. It may be a board communication about the Riverbank development.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so is there a motion to
So moved.
keep this one and then do a have the staff and renumber it to 7212? So it'll be AR 7212, and then have staff do a comparison to ensure that it aligns with the board policy and there isn't any conflict. You said yes, Trustee
I did.
Walker makes
Trying to
a
get us
motion.
out the door.
And Trustee Irvin, there you are, Meg says second. So all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. This concludes our third Saturday of board policies. I am grateful to all of you for your patience through this and that we finished before 11:30 today even. So,
Yes.
all right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
And a thank you goes out to Mr. Zerly for his work today.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Zerly.
Zerly
Yes.
Show.
All right. Okay, then moved by trustee Newman, second for trustee West. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Of adjourning. Have a great Saturday and a good Super Bowl day tomorrow.
Go Niners. Hey, John.